Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Cycles of Faith. As always, we have a phenomenal guest with us today. Let me read a little bit about her from her bio. She holds many titles. Those titles include filmmaker, radio host, actress, international model, author, wife, and most importantly, with our discussion today, a mom. Author of multiple books, and how to get them will be on the bottom of the screen throughout the show. Her radio show went nationally syndicated, and she publicly speaks around the country and recently appeared in the movies Hope Bridge with Kevin Sorbo. Just Let Go was another one where she won the Best Supporting Actress at the Utah Film Festival in this one. She served as producer and co-star of a film that she actually co-wrote, Let There Be Light, and more recently, Miracle in East Texas. And I believe this is inspired from a true story. It stars Kevin Sorbo and Lou Gossett Jr. Her book, They're Your Kids, is what we want to focus on today with the topic of homeschooling. Her book was released with great reviews, and her current passion, she's an advocate for homeschooling. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the talented and beautiful Sam Sorbo. Sam, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. You're a busy lady, and thank you for taking time to do this show with us. The topic today we want to discuss is homeschooling, and I am pro homeschooling. I raised twins, and we have homeschooled them from the 5th grade all the way through graduation. And there was one thing, a good testimony about homeschooling that I want to share with everybody watching. They wanted to walk across an actual high school stage to get their diploma. So we went to the local high school, and the principal says, no, we can't do that. So after talking to him a while, he finally said, look, let's get them to take their test. And if they pass this test, we'll let them do that. Well, through homeschooling, not only did they pass the test, they ranked 30% higher than their valedictorian. So with honors, they allowed my daughters to walk across stage with a cap and gown and get their own diploma. So Sam, an advocate of homeschooling, let's talk about it. What is the best? You know, I know our kids are being indoctrinated in the school, in our classrooms, and some indoctrination that we absolutely do not want. So why should parents? It's a hot topic right now, and a lot of parents are on the cusp of making that decision on whether they should continue homeschooling or whether they should put them back in school. And then a lot of schools are changing. They're now saying that there's going to be less, they have to wear a mask, and go ahead. Let me give it to you. Let me shut up and go ahead.
Well, okay. So you just unpacked a whole bunch of stuff. Here's the thing that we're not understanding is education is actually as much about the parent as it is about the child. So yes, the children are being indoctrinated in our classrooms. They're being indoctrinated away from the parents' values. Mm-hmm. And so with COVID, what we've seen all of these parents trying to hustle in and start educating their children at home because that was the call. That what they're doing is not homeschooling. They're just having some schoolwork that the child does at home instead of going into the institution. Right. And that's really not the same thing at all. So with my books and with my speaking, as much as I'm pro children, I'm really trying to educate parents to understand it's a much bigger, it's a much more profound thing than what we're thinking. And the reason that it is because what we think of education is wrong. We don't think of education properly because we've been schooled.
Right.
And school is not education.
Right.
And so I'm trying to reach out to parents. Now there are a lot of parents who are saying, in fact, I just had one, and she's going to start doing, I do classical conversations. She just signed up for classical conversations. This is a mom I've been talking to. We've been friends for years. And her thing was, yeah, the homeschooling, and you're great at it, and I get it, but it's just not for me. You know, my son's school's really good, and they're sweet, and whatever, right? With COVID, things have changed to such a degree that even she is going, oh, this is not going to work. I had another mom say to me that her daughter said to her, Mom, if I have to wear a mask, I don't want to do it.
Wow.
And there are a lot of kids out there who are going to their parents and they're saying, you know, I don't want to have to do that. Like school's fine, but not that. And I'm seeing more and more, and I love it because it's telling me two things. It's one, that the kids are understanding that masks are a restriction on their freedoms, and they value freedom. And I love seeing that. Yeah. And two, that they're actually encouraging their parents, come on, you know, pick up the ball, Mom. Let's see if we can run this one for a touchdown. Let's give this a shot. For that reason, you know, I'm trying to speak to parents and encourage them to take this journey, because it's an amazing journey that you take with your children, and you don't understand what you're sacrificing when you give your children over into an institution. You can't possibly understand what that sacrifice actually amounts to. And it's a lot more than you're even imagining now that I'm making you think about it. It's more than that. Just like education is more than school. In fact, it's different than school. And it's funny because now parents are saying, well, how am I going to educate my child? And it's so funny because that was never really the topic for parents when we were talking home education. They were saying, well, what about socialization?
Yeah.
And now they're going, wait a minute, what about education? Okay, thank you for catching up with the rest of us. I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying, so in my book, I go into this in detail because I did not feel qualified to educate my child at home. I didn't. And by the way, like I went to Duke University. I was a really good student and I learned everything that I was supposed to learn in school. Right. And I still felt inadequate. And you're going, well, why do I feel inadequate? I was talking to a mom the other day and I said to her, what's your greatest fear? What is the thing that's holding you back here from just making the decision? Her child is 13. 13-year-olds can stay at home alone. You don't need a babysitter. So even if you're working, you can still supervise their learning and still make sure that they're getting it done. Right. And by the way, if you're not doing that and you're sending your kids to school, shame on you, because the school's not doing it. Yeah. You think the school can babysit, 30 kids to a classroom all day long? Like, yeah, I don't think so. Right. In fact, that's partly the reason that I chose to start home educating and it's a story that I tell in my book. So I talk about this because we feel so inadequate. But think about that.
We do.
You feel inadequate. I sat across this woman. I said, what's the thing that's holding you back? And she literally, she got tears in her eyes. She started almost to sob. Wow. She was like, I think I'm afraid that I'll let him down.
That was the fear that we faced in homeschooling our children.
And everybody does, right? And what's our impetus? We're looking at the schools and we're going, they're not doing it.
Right.
I feared that I would fail my child by making my child go back into that system. And guess what? If your children are saying to you now, Mommy, I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to do the things that they're telling me to do. They're going to make us sit at our desks all day long. Right. We have to eat lunch at our desks because they have the lockdowns. Yeah. So if your child is saying to you, I don't want to do that, pull them out of school. Please don't sacrifice your relationship with your child to march to the drumbeat, right? To conform to the new norms. And by the way, it is not the new, I'm sorry, it is not the new normal. I refuse to accept that.
Yay, me too.
And we can get into all the science and the non-science that's behind the whole thing. I'm happy to wrestle with you on that. That's not what this conversation is about. So let's talk about steps that you can take
Absolutely.
Because you need some concrete steps. You're saying, okay, she's making some sense here, and I know my child doesn't want to go back to school, but how am I going to get this done? How am I going to make this happen so that I'm satisfied that he's getting an education and that I'm not just completely, dropping the ball on all of this. And he's satisfied that I'm protecting him and taking care of him and making sure that he has the best experience possible, right? Okay. First steps is you need some kind of plan, okay? The thing that I advocate for, because I really like it, is classical conversations. That's what I've done since, let's see, it hasn't been the whole time. So I've been homeschooling for over a decade. It hasn't been the whole time. It took me a couple years to discover them. I had a friend who sort of turned me on to them, and I never look back. I think what they do is fantastic. It's a classical Christian education, and it's superb. But you could also just go get yourself some resources. The Well-Trained Mind, I think, is one of them that talks about classical education. When you start reading a book like that, or like you can read the Dorothy Sayers essay called The Lost Tools of Learning, which is just a short essay. Dorothy Sayers, Lost Tools of Learning. That goes into
We can find all this stuff. We can find all this. We can find all this stuff by just Googling it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Find websites, books, and all that. Okay.
The Dorothy Sayers article really talks about how our education system is no longer educating.
Right.
Okay. We call it an education system, but that's not what it's doing. And when you start to realize that, you go, hold on, wait a minute. I got to rethink all of this now. My whole paradigm, the bottom is falling out from under it, and I don't know what to do. And I just want to tell you, don't panic.
Right.
Just understand that you don't yet understand, but you're going to take steps. And as you walk this road, you will discover the things that you need to know. Okay. So don't freak out. Do understand that it's a learning process, just like what you're going to put your kids through. It's a learning process for you. And let's face it, parenting is a learning process for all of us. We've never been parents before. We never went to school for it,
right.
But we've learned about it. We've figured it out, right?
Right.
So you can start there. I do not recommend, in fact, I recommend against going online and doing K through 12, mainly because public schools are crap. How do I say that? Well, we're like 27th in the world standings. We pay more than almost every other country, with the exception of Switzerland. Per student, we pay more.
Wow.
And our education, and we're coming out 27, we're coming out behind Lithuania, for crying out. And nothing against Lithuania, but I'm sorry. We're the United States of America. Come on.
Right.
So understand that the bar is set very, very low. All you have to do is step over it. It's not even a jump. It's just a step. Just take one step and you're over the bar. So there's that. So don't go online and go to K through 12. Go online, find yourself some kind of classical Christian education that makes sense, and go ahead and take some time. Do a little research. You don't have to re-up in the fall just because there's, other kids are going back to school in the fall.
Right.
Take some time and do some education for yourself so that you can direct the education of your child, not the schooling of your child, the education of your child. Take some time, go to the museum.
Right.
Do some research at the museum.
Right.
Go to the library, do some research, find out from your child. And this is, of course, kids have different ages. So I'm now talking about, say you have a teenager. Say to your child, what are you interested in? Well, I really like the whole building things. Okay, let's go to the library and get some books on building things. What do you want to build? Do you want to build a house? Do you want to build a car? Do you want to, right? Do some research. Find YouTube. My gosh, YouTube's a great resource.
Right. Parents need to go through a learning curve to get away from the concept of school, get away from the concept of sitting in a class for 8 hours a day, and they need to really take on the conception of education.
Right. What education actually is.
Right.
And it's not schooling. It's not putting a bunch of information in the brain for the child to then graduate and say, oh, thank God, if I never have to learn anything else again in my life, I'll be happy. No. Right. The product of education should be an inquisitive mind. Mm-hmm. Should be somebody who's willing and anxious to learn new things every day.
That's good.
Okay. And what we don't have is we don't see a lot of that. And so, and like you saying, oh my gosh, I could never homeschool my children, I just don't even know where to start. That's an example of how poor our school system was, that you've ended up being somebody who basically has atrophied in their brain.
Wow.
Enough to say, yeah, how important are your children to you? Are they not worth it? Like, okay, if that's shaming some people, well, my bad. But if your children are important to you, then take heed, because I think coronavirus is a big wake-up call for people to embrace this challenge. It's a challenge. Yes, it's a challenge, because boy, your whole paradigm is now shifting, because you thought education was one thing, and I'm here saying, no, it's not. It's something completely different. But it's not only a challenge, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for your child to learn things that they never would have. It's an opportunity for you to grow, and it's an opportunity for your relationship with your child as well.
Right. Exactly. And what about the rights that parents have? I believe it's in the Constitution that the parents have a right to train their own children. And so what about somebody that's going to come up and say, well, is a school, is a society coming to take my kids away from me because I should have them in public school?
Okay. I don't know that there's a right. The Constitution doesn't actually delineate our rights, but
Right.
but there's no non-right. Okay, there's no rescindment of rights. And so, and currently in the United States, every state has legalized home education. Now, what does that mean for you in your state? Go to HSLDA or any of the other websites. I spent a lot of time in the spring promoting coronavirushomeschooling.com. That's a great wealth of resources for people who are new to homeschooling, coronavirushomeschooling.com. And they also have, I think, all the information for the individual states. So every state is a little bit different, so that you can stay within the law. But in every state, it's legal. Some states insist on testing, other states don't do any testing. Right. So you just have to find out sort of what the rules are in your state so that you're not going against the law. But there are people out there who say it is not the parents' job to educate the children. And to them, I say, the Bible makes it very clear that it is absolutely and only the parents' job. There are two references in the Bible of where it's the grandparents' job to educate the children, like that they play a role in that. But by and large, it makes it very clear the parents' job is to disciple the child, to educate the child. Discipuli means students in Latin, and that's where we get the word disciple. So, and of course, discipleship, right? So the idea is, look at it as an opportunity. Right. Start doing some research. I highly advocate, it doesn't matter what age the child is, I highly advocate that you go online and order for them, or go to the library and check out for them classic literature. And there are plenty of different lists that are available online at, at good sources, right, for classic literature. I do not advocate for the new novels that are coming out, the new juvenile novels or the teen romance books or any of that. That's not what I'm advocating. Right. Set your child up with the classic literature. Why? Because the classic literature goes into problems and issues without a lot of hype. Yes, some of the books are seen as boring, but it discusses really valuable information in a way that makes it that makes the child understand that there is such a thing as virtue, that there is such a thing as good versus evil, and that's something that we are rapidly doing away with in our school system. Right. The idea that there's a hierarchy of values. Oh no, everybody's the same. Everything's fair. There isn't any one thing that's better than another thing, and it stems off of anti-discrimination, right? But you and I both know, chocolate is better than vanilla, or maybe you disagree. That's fine. But we all have our hierarchies of values. Right, absolutely. And so if we will admit that we have our own hierarchies of values, then we really ought to admit that there is one supernatural hierarchy of values.
Exactly right.
And that's very important for children to learn, because otherwise they're just cut loose in a world where they can't make sense of anything because everybody's got their own separate opinion and there's nothing that's right or wrong.
Right. When we started out homeschooling, we were very disciplined with the times and their daily routine. We made them get up at 7 o'clock every morning. By 8 o'clock, you had to be studying your books, and by 11 o'clock, they were done. And so that was their incentive: get done early, then you can do what you want to do throughout the rest of the day. So by the time they were in high school, they were already in that mode. And so I think that's very important. Let's get them on a schedule, because we still want to teach them the educational values of what time is about and the value of time, stuff like that. So it really worked for us.
So to that, I would say, I also started out that way. 9 o'clock, I was a little lazier than you. 9 o'clock, we met at the kitchen table. We started with our Latin and our devotion, and we got our day started. I did incentivize my children so that if they finished early, they got to play a game or they got to, do something fun. So incentivization is also a very good thing. And I'll refer your viewers to my website, samsorbo.com, where all of my videos are. And I've done just a whole bunch of YouTube videos talking about the various facets of home education. One of them is scheduling, right? So some children respond to schedules better, right. Others don't. And you need to pick your battles. Right. Some children respond to incentives and specific incentives, and other children won't respond to those incentives at all, but maybe other incentives they'll respond to. And so part of the education is you need to get to know your kids. Absolutely. And figure out how best to serve them. Right. So my youngest is an artist, and I went through a whole challenging time because I'm not an artist in that same way at all. She has such patience to sit and draw for hours on end. Wow. And then I honestly, I prayed about it a lot, and I finally figured out, no, my job is to serve her. And so art is just another discipline. So how can I serve her to be the best at that discipline? And I figured it out. And it basically was just encouraging her to schedule herself the time to do the art and to make it pay off in ways. And you can do that with anything. So, but I guess the greatest thing that you should understand with home education is it's outside the box. So the institution, the school building, is a box. Right. And when you put your child inside a box every day, don't be surprised when they come out thinking inside a box, right? They can't think outside the box because they've been taught inside a box to think inside a box. Now we're challenging you as the parent to think outside the box, to explore the possibilities, right? Which are outside the box. They're just everywhere. Right. And to bring that kind of attitude and approach to education of your children. And then you'll have entrepreneurs. You'll have children who can learn anything at any time because they understand the mechanics of learning, as opposed to just understanding that they have to memorize this one thing or they have to learn how to do this one thing. No, what you want to teach them is how to learn. And if that requires you to learn how to learn, trust me, you can do this. You can do this very easily.
Absolutely. And we can make it fun. Parents can make it fun.
Oh, yeah.
And the children.
Well, learning is fun, right? So right. And here's the thing: we're born curious. When we're babies, we're curious about everything. What's the first thing we do when we're babies? We put everything in our mouth, right? I mean, that's just sort of, and then after that, it just becomes touchy-feely, everything, trying to learn everything that we can. So that's just the natural state of the human being. Right. And then you send them to school, and the school sort of beats it out of them. Sit in your chair. Don't interrupt me. Raise your hand to speak. I mean, I have a book group, and I still have women who raise their hand to speak. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's polite, but come on, let's be a little bit more relaxed here and have a chat. Anyway, so the idea is to embrace the journey of learning with your child. And I'm sorry, if your child's interested in something that you have no interest in, two things. two things about that. First, and this goes both ways. If you're not interested in something, the minute that you dig below the surface into the details, it becomes more interesting. So tell your children that. And your child is like, oh, I have no interest in that. Don't worry. The moment you dig below the surface and you get into the details, it actually becomes more interesting. And then take that to heart. So if your child really wants to learn about auto mechanics and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to know the first thing about auto mechanics, understand that if you embrace that and you just start that journey with your child, and by the way, you don't have to walk very far down that road. You just have to get them started. Oh my gosh, you're their hero, okay? Yeah. And then they can go and discover the things that they want to discover. I have a child who's an engineer, and he regales me with explanations of things that I couldn't care less about.
And you're training them to explore, right? Exactly.
But I sit there, and I feign interest, and by and large, I'm moderately interested. But he goes into these long explanations, and I'm like, that's fantastic. Yeah. And my joy is that he's found his joy.
Exactly.
And I think that that's our role as parents, right? We want them to find their joy. They're separate individuals. So let's just enable them to go and find what brings them the happiness and inspires them, the inspiration that they need.
Right, and we're training them at the same time how to explore and discover and invent and just go to a broad amount of things. We got about a minute left. Now you have a weekly conversation and a talk show, kind of a podcast type thing that we're actually trying to get onto the network. How do we find that? How do we get people in contact with that?
So my radio show is on mojo50.com, but it's also a podcast. So it's just the Sam Sorbo Show podcast.
Okay. And you're going to start doing some educational speeches with another group. Is that correct?
So there's another group called Homeschool Exit, and we're doing a weekly presentation every Wednesday at, I'm going to say 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's 11 a.m. Pacific time. And it's just a forum. It's a Zoom conference, and anybody can show up. It's totally free. And it's a panel of experts, homeschool experts from all different facets. We've got retired school teacher. We've got me and other people that just have just a plethora of information about home education. And we'll just be answering questions. So please join us and bring your questions, because we understand that it's a scary thing. I remember how scared I was, okay? And I have made it my mission to empower parents to take this on, because when you drop your children off at school, you are being robbed.
Yes, I agree. We are out of time. Sam, thank you so much for taking time to do this with us, and hopefully we can convince thousands of parents to say, yes, I'm going to homeschool.
Yes, and by the way, I take emails and I will answer them on YouTube. So if you want to send me questions, just go to samsorbo.com, or maybe I'll answer it at Public School Exit tomorrow or something like that. So. Okay,
awesome. Thank you again, and we appreciate you, and let's get homeschooling.
Thank you. God bless.
All right, thank you, everybody, and we will see you on the next show. Bye-bye.